Hey Gear Seekers, I'm Nick. It's been a long time since we've seen a new MATX case from anyone. Your eyes aren't deceiving you, ladies and gents. We've got a brand new MATX case from Cooler Master. It's called the Cooler Master TD300 Mesh. It's a shrunken down version of the bigger brother, the TD500 Mesh. Kind of a case that I've been waiting for a long time. I've known about this case for a very, very long time. And here it is in the flesh. So we're gonna do our usual thing. We're gonna pull it all apart. We're gonna see what makes this thing tick. We're gonna do a build. We're gonna test the thermals. We're going to do absolutely everything with this case. So strap yourself in. I don't know what to say now. Strap yourself in and what? Strap yourself in. Let's go. Come on. As I mentioned, we're gonna take a close look, but one thing I've gotta say, and I hate saying this at the start of any video, but guys, if you watch our channel, make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, ring the bell, do all of those things to let us know that you care. Let's start off with panel removal. They are captive thumb screws for the side glass panel. You guys would have probably already noticed that this is a tinted glass panel, something that doesn't actually make sense to me for a white case. I guess it's just them saying, hey, you know, we did it for the black one. Let's just do it for the white one too. I would have much preferred just a regular old clear panel with no tint, but we don't get everything we want. Back panel removal, same deal, captive thumb screws. I actually had to loosen these pre-filming because they were quite tight, but you know, it is what it is, whatever. Front panel removal, same as every other case like this. Probably like the best thing to do would be yanking it from the bottom and then, you know, yank the doodle. And the last panel to remove, which is actually a really nice feature of this case, is this. Now, Cooler Master has finally started listening to what we want. They've done a big shake up with their case business over the last 18 months, which is why you're probably like, hey, why haven't you released anything cool other than the NR200P in a while? That's why. The top panel removes from the case. We've got access to absolutely everything from every single angle, which is brilliant. You can also mount the radiator and whatnot to this panel and slot it in when you want to go and be like, hey, I need to change something. Let's take it out. So now you can. There's also a magnetic fan filter here as well, which you probably noticed when I pulled the top panel off. It's also got some fan mounting, which we're going to come back to. They did this removable panel on the MB540 first, which, as you may or may not know, is a case that I absolutely hated. Circling back to the top panel, to remove it is quite easy. You basically just undo these two screws up the top and you can just pop it off. In terms of hard drive mounting, you've got this cage for 3.5-inch drives. You can put 2 of them in total, and the cage is removable by this single screw as well, which may or may not be something that you do. Me personally, with a case like this, to give me additional power supply clearance, I will be removing this cage when I build with it. There's also 2 additional SSD mounts on the back of the case here, which have those rubber grommets with the little push pin system that Cooler Master typically uses. On the inside of the case, there's 2 more additional SSD mounting points as well. For power supply support, you're looking at 140mm power supplies. If you leave this drive cage in, I can see that a lot of people will be removing this cage if they go with a case like this, because more than likely they'll get some SSDs to go on the back here. Removing the drive cage will allow you to use the power supply up to 325mm, which is absurd because there's no real power supplies that are that size. Included with the case are all of the accessories you need to build. So standard stuff like screws, zip ties, drive sleds, all the regular stuff that you would need to build in this case. There's a built-in addressable RGB and PWM Fan Hub. They also have the reset switch wired up to control the lighting as well, so you can press the reset switch on the front of the case to change the lighting for the 2 included fans. That being said, you can connect up to 5 addressable RGB devices on this hub. The fan and RGB hub uses SATA power to power it, as well as some ARGB pass-through, so you can plug this into your motherboard so you can control the lighting in your motherboard, and a PWM connector to send signal from your motherboard to control fan speed as well for all of the fans. You've got your regular hard disk activity light, you've got the power LED and the power switch. There's also a USB 3.2 connector for the front panel USB Type A, and the front panel audio connector as well for the front panel audio. For the front panel connectivity itself, you've got a headphone and a microphone jack, individual ones, and USB Type A, as well as a reset button and also a power button. There's two pre-installed Cooler Master SickleFlow fans. These are addressable RGB and they're plugged into that included RGB hub up the front. However, you can change the fans on the front here, so you can do two 140mm fans up the front as well. While we're on the topic of fan and radiator support, it's a bit easier to see from this angle as well. So like I mentioned, you could do two 140s, two 120s. You can actually do three 120mm fans. The only caveat is you can only mount those fans on the inside of the case and not on the outside like this. And that's to do with clearance up the top here for that front IO, but you can actually do three 120s, but that doesn't mean you can do a 360mm AIO because of the end tanks of the coolers. To stick with the stock fan configuration in the TD300 Mesh, I won't be changing out these fans. On the rear, there's also a single 120mm fan mount with long cutouts so you can push the fan up and down wherever you'd like to go, to kind of accommodate for the radiator mounting if you're wanting to do that at the top. In the top of the case, you can mount two 140mm fans or two 120mm fans. And as I showed previously, the whole top panel is removable. So if you're installing a radiator or any type of liquid cooling stuff, it is very easy to remove that top panel, put in whatever you need, and then drop the panel back in. So you don't need to squeeze stuff in, you can just go ahead and do it that way. In terms of motherboard support, the TD300 Mesh supports obviously ITX and MATX motherboards. So here is the board that we're actually going to be using for the build. We actually did an overview of this motherboard. I'll put a link in the description if you want to check that out at your own leisure. But as mentioned, yeah, this is the board that's going in here. It's also got a center peg to hold the board in place while you're screwing it in if you're building it in this orientation as well. So in terms of support for air coolers, you're looking at a maximum height of 166mm. So a lot of tower coolers on the market will actually fit in this case quite easily. So the Hyper 212 and all of those will fit no problem whatsoever. In terms of maximum GPU length in the TD300 Mesh, you're looking at 344mm. We usually do the Strix test, but we don't have a Strix card available right now. So we'll do the Gaming Z Trio test, which is also a really big GPU. And you can see that once mounted, that this huge GPU actually fits in here too. But as I always say with these, make sure you do your research as to what you're going to actually be putting in your system before buying any cases. But just as a bit of a heads up, the Gaming Z Trio cards, the really big ones, do indeed fit. Also, we get a lot of questions about vertically mounting in MATX cases. Not really possible. As far as cable management, there's a stack of tie down points all around the case here. So for your EPS power cable, 24-pin power cable, there are a couple tie downs, but if I'm being honest, it would have been better to see a couple more here. That's essentially everything you need to know about the TD300 Mesh, but let's do our usual thing. Let's do a build, we'll test the thermals, and then I'll let you guys know what I think about this case from Cooler Master. Let's jump in. ladies and gents, I hope you enjoyed the build in the brand new Cooler Master TD300 Mesh. It's an MATX case, and if there's anything weird on your screen right now, it's not a dead pixel, it's just a really extreme lens flare, if you're seeing that somewhere on the screen. I don't know why I'm telling you, but anyway, let's take a look at the thermals of the TD300 Mesh. What you're seeing on your screen right now is the thermals aren't too bad. Now, people are gonna say, oh, that system runs so hot. Take into account we're running the 12700K. It's a pretty warm CPU, and these Founders cards usually run quite warm, so on the 12700K and these Founders card, the thermals aren't terrible. They're just about okay. All right, let's chat about some of the parts used in this build. As mentioned, the CPU used the Intel Core i7-12700K. We put the 12700K on the MSI MAG B660M Mortar Wi-Fi DDR4. To cool the 12700K, we use the Cooler Master ML240 Illusion White Edition. The GPU is the NVIDIA RTX 3080 Ti Founders Edition. The RAM is 16 gigs of V-Color Prism RGB at 4133 megahertz, and it's the Gear Seekers edition because it says Gear Seekers on the modules, which is very, very cool. All the fans in the system are Cooler Master SickleFlow 120mm ARGB fans. There is 5 in total. The cable extensions are cable mod cable extensions. We've even got the 12-pin cable extension for the Founders card as well from cable mod. And if there's any other parts that I missed, I'll put a PC part picker list down below in the description. We do this in all of our builds, so if you ever want to see what all the parts are, just click that list. It's got everything. All right, let's chat about the TD300 Mesh and what it's like to build in and just stuff that I noticed with the case. I think the cable management in this case is what let it down a little bit. It needs more tie down points in the back of the case to pull all those cables closer to the motherboard tray. I noticed that it was quite difficult to put on the back panel. I had to kind of force it on to make it fit, but we got there in the end. And you got to take into account though, there's not that much stuff in here. In terms of actual amount of hardware in here, this is pretty light in the sense that it doesn't really have that much except cable extensions. So, you know, that obviously has something to do with it being harder to cable manage as well. But a lot of people will be going down this path if they're building in this case. So just something to note, just be aware of the cable management. But overall, I think the execution of the Cooler Master TD300 Mesh is pretty good. Like, I don't hate it. This is still one of the better MATX cases that I've seen over the last few years. Deepcool released a bunch last year and the year before, and they use similar type of materials, but this is better. Simple as that. This is better than anything Deepcool's put out in the last couple of years in terms of MATX cases. What I would like to see, now this is just on a complete random tangent, is Corsair needs to make a 3000D, like an MATX version of the 4000D, and I reckon that would give this a run for its money. And speaking of money, the price of the TD300 Mesh. Now, this case is available, but kind of not at the same time. For US pricing, at the time of filming this video and putting it together, I didn't find definitive US pricing. I do have Australian pricing. If you're looking at getting yourself a TD300 Mesh here in Australia, you're looking at spending around about 99 Aussie dollars, which is pretty good for a case like this, considering you get those 2 addressable RGB fans, you get the PWM Fan Hub, the RGB Fan Hub, and a pretty well executed case. Now, again, it's not the most premium of materials, but it does feel quite solid. So good work, Cooler Master, on the TD300 Mesh. It's almost everything that I wanted from a new MATX case from Cooler Master, except, and I gotta say this, the tinted glass on the white case is a little bit of a bummer. I would have loved to have seen it just be straight up transparent. That would have been like the absolute banger. But that's just me nitpicking things that I don't like about it. But other than that, I think it's a pretty solid case. Anyways, guys, if you like the music you heard here, I make all the music. It's available by clicking that join button down below down there, and you can get access to all the newer stuff that I upload for members only. Also, you can get it on Floatplane and Patreon as well if you want to support us that way. If you don't want to give Google some of our money and you want to just like directly contribute, whatever. And if you haven't subscribed yet now, I know there's a lot of people who watch our channel who don't click the subscription button. Click it, just do it. Especially if you're watching all the time. I can see the return viewers and people who aren't subscribed. You are watching the channel, just click it, ring the bell, do all the things. And I'm your boy Nick with Gear Seekers. You peak, we seek, and it's time for the first cinematic Tings of 2022. Let's do it.